Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. I'm joined today by my sister, Darren. Hi, Darren.
Hi.
She's joined me today because we both read this author's debut novel and both loved it so much. We were sending voice notes back and forth. We were talking about it in depth. And then when I reached out to her and asked if she'd be a guest, I asked Darren if she wanted to interview her with me so that we could do this together. So without further ado, please welcome the author of This Girl's a Killer, Emma C. Wells. Emma, thanks for joining us.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm excited. We were talking before this started recording, and I feel like we got so much good stuff out of you that I can't wait to ask these questions.
Oh yeah. I like to talk, so that should, I lose the plot a lot. Like I'll forget what I'm saying, but yeah, I love to talk. I love to answer questions. So I'm happy to be here.
So then let's start with the first one. How did you get into writing? Like, have you always wanted to be an author? What have you always wrote?
I have always wanted to be a writer, but I never seriously thought it could be like my career. I thought the best that I could hope for would be, just not to say unjust. Like this is not less than, but it was like a lofty goal for me was writing things and having it published locally. I had no idea, but it is something I always wanted to do. And then one day I just kind of buckled down and was like, you know what? Not getting any younger. Let's do this and dig in and started really learning about the publishing industry, started learning how to write a good book, like how to edit. Like I feel like that's a big part of it is learning how to edit. And from there, it just, I can't even explain what happened. It's just like it builds on itself. Like you make one step and then you learn more. And you're like, oh no, now there's this much more I have to learn how to do. And you just tackle what's right in front of you and keep going. I will tell you, I recently found, before I was like serious about doing it, I think I was like 18 and I was just like hopelessly optimistic, like bright eyed, working at this daycare, reading these kids like these children's books. And I was like, I could write a kid's book. And I think like wrote something out by hand in like 30 minutes. And I was like, let me find a publisher and looked in the back of a book and sent them this like handwritten thing, like in the mail. Bless whoever got that on their desk because they should have just probably tossed it right in the trash. Because who did I think I was? Like, publish my handwritten 5-minute written story and turn it into a book and make all my dreams come true. But they, like, I guess I told them I was like 18 and I wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And I still have where they literally mailed me back because this was before everybody was emailing. We had email addresses, but nobody was doing it because I'm old. And they sent me like their form rejection, but on the back, they like handwrote me this note and they were like, here's some resources. You should look into this. You're young. Don't give up on your dream. And like, I have that.
That's so sweet.
And it just like meant the world to me. And like, honestly, at that point where I was like, okay, a publisher read this. I'm good.
Yeah.
I was 18. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, just so happy, like, which kind of sums up my personality. I'm like just happy to be at the party.
Yeah. So. It's funny that you say that because a children's book compared to what you have now published as your debut novel, very different.
Yes.
But speaking of, can you give us a synopsis of your debut novel, This Girl's a Killer?
Okay. So Cordelia Black is lots of things to lots of people. She wears many hats. She's a best friend. She's a godmother. She is a badass pharmaceutical rep. She has a ton of credit card debt and nurses a low-key anxiety disorder. She's also, on certain Friday nights, a serial killer who hunts very bad men who have otherwise escaped justice. She lures them to her workshop and has a really good time getting rid of them. It's a pretty good life until her best friend she would do anything for runs headfirst toward a red flag and starts dating this man that she thinks that makes her spidey sense tingle. And she's like, okay, do I just not like him or do I need to kill him? And slowly one bad decision after another leaves her scrambling. And if she doesn't get together, she's going to lose everything she cares about.
And both of us loved this book. Can you tell us where the idea came from?
You know, I don't know where the full-fledged idea came from, but Cordelia kind of lived in my head for a minute before I ever attempted to like give her a story. I started thinking about her probably right around the Me Too time when all of that was happening, and thinking about like my own experiences and my own stories and things I had been through. And then thinking about how oftentimes we're just expected to get over stuff, just
Hmm.
get over it. It's not that bad. Somebody
Hmm.
else, something worse happened to somebody else. So you don't
Yeah.
get to complain. You just keep going. And
Mm.
I think she kind of come from that. She was born out of that, like that low simmer rage, like it's just like always there, just a little bit in the back.
Yeah.
And she was birthed from that,
Yeah.
to use an awkward term.
I mean, it makes sense though. I think
Yeah.
as a woman, I'm reading it going, you know what? I kind of get it. Like I'm on Cordelia's side. I don't think
Mhm.
she's a villain. Like I'm here for it.
Like, I
So
don't condone murder.
yeah.
With
Right.
that said, I get it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, vigilante justice only works in fiction because
Yep.
there's too much room for mistake, but damn it, it can feel really good in fiction, right?
Yeah.
You
There's
know.
something about it as you're reading it. And especially as you're reading, some of the characters she comes across, you feel the same things that she's feeling as a reader. And you're like, oh, that's something's off here.
Mhm. Like,
Mhm.
specifically, I mean, I wanted to bring up a character in the book, Simon, who,
Yes.
like, especially as women, Kendall and I talked about this at length, where, like, we all know a Simon, where on paper, he says all the right things, but something's up, something's wrong. You get this bad feeling in your gut, and you can't always tell what it is. And
Yes.
then when you're proven right, that your intuition, you knew something was up. So
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you about writing a character like him.
Hmm.
Just, yeah, him as a person, his,
I think
anyways,
you kind of
yeah.
hit the nail on the head. Like we all know someone that, or have had an experience with someone that outwardly you can't put your finger on it, but they just give you, I say the heebie jeebies, but I have a teenager, so I know they say the ick, but you get the ick from that.
Yep.
And they make you just, something's off, and you're like, I don't know that I would want to be alone with this person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say probably my first, well, not my first experience with this, but the first time that I could articulate feeling this way, I was probably a teenager, and we were moving because of my dad's job, and we met um, who was essentially like one of his coworkers, and just made me feel just like ugh. And then like
Yeah.
later talking to like my sisters, and they were like, "Oh, what's wrong with that guy?" So we all picked up
Yeah.
on it, and I was like, "Okay."
Mhm.
And like he literally did. There wasn't anything he did. It
Yeah.
was just an overall like, don't stand too close to me,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a little too much in every
Hmm.
area. And I feel like we've all been in that situation. In a lot of ways, we've been conditioned to not listen to that inner voice, and to to almost like gaslight ourselves into like, oh,
Yeah.
we're just being crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Like, you're being too sensitive, you're overthinking
Yeah.
it, something like
exactly.
that.
When really
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
have that intuition for a reason. I
Yeah.
mean, like honestly, I would rather be a little bit rude, which is
Yeah.
hard for me because I want to be a nice person. But
Mhm.
some growth, I think, is realizing that it's better to be rude than to end up in a situation
Yeah.
that you don't want to be in.
For sure. And
But also with
especially as a
Simon, I did
woman.
have to pull back and make him a little more palatable, because earlier versions of him, he was just like a complete, which he is a horrible person, but you could
Yeah.
see it more.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and I had people point out, well, then why would Diane be with him? It was because I was writing from Cordelia's point of view. And so
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
could see, and so I had to kind of dampen it, because I felt like
Hmm.
she picked up on it, and I had to rewrite him in a way that would maybe show that, okay, she can at least understand why Diane would, want to have anything to do with this guy, much less maybe
Mhm.
fall for him.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about writing horror and writing specifically kill scenes and, like, how she deals with her victims in a wonderfully grotesque way that's also not incredibly upsetting to read. It's still like writing body horror and gore, but in a palatable way.
Yes. So we ended up shelving it as a psychological thriller. So I had to pull way back on it because I kind of feel like it bumps that line. Like sometimes when I do things, I end up on like horror panels or I'll end up on like a thriller panel. So I'm like happy. I'm a big fan of both genres. So I'm like, okay, I'm just happy to be here. But it actually, to me, it's not about writing it. It's about editing it. Like I write, me personally, I overwrite. So that means I overwrite the whole book. But those scenes, anything that isn't on the page is, with exceptions of things we don't need, but like with Cordelia dealing with the bodies, where she just like tells us real quick what she did.
Yeah.
I wrote that. That exists. You don't have to read it, thank goodness, because my agent is like, girl, leave some things for the imagination. Maybe pull back just a little bit. But I wrote it, and then like I kind of like get a sense of it when I'm reading it. I go back and like almost just surgically remove things. And it's probably not the best way to write because you end up doing a lot of work that you don't have to do if you know better, but it works for me. And if I try to do it differently, I kind of hit a roadblock. So like, I think I did all this research on on blood and coagulation, and like originally we knew exactly there was a much more intricate way that she managed these bad people in her workshop, because I was like, okay, in real life, this wouldn't work. We would need to do it this way. And so the reader must know. And my agent's like, the reader does not need to know. They're fine. They can fill in the blanks. And I'm like, okay, if I researched it, you need to know too. If I have to live with this. No,
well, also, I'm curious because, yeah, like you said, like you have to research a certain amount. What do you research to make it realistic? Because, like, all of us, not all of us, but many of us watch shows like Criminal Minds and see this and kind of understand that, or SVU, and you see this, the horrific mind of certain people. Not that Cordelia is, because we love her, we stand for her, but you know, you also have to write it where it's realistic, and you could get away with murder, you could get away with these things. How do you research that and kind of write that out?
So with this book, and you know, it is my debut, so I have a little bit more freedom, because when I wrote this book, I didn't even have a literary agent yet. So I didn't know if anybody was ever going to read it. So there wasn't a timeline. There wasn't like an expectation. So we'll see how things change as I go forward in my career. But it was more like I would come across something that just felt bizarre to me, and that would almost spur the idea instead of, and I would like store it away and kind of think, well, maybe I'll use this one day. So like one of the ways that, without spoilers, that she gets rid of the body is we talk about like the body donation industry, the industry that surrounds donating your body to science.
Yeah.
I came across an article, and this was forever ago, because like I lived in a different house at this point, and it just kind of stuck with me. And it was about how there's such limited government oversight in that. And you have all these people that literally take advantage of it. There's been places shut down because like blood was literally flowing into the streets, but the things that people are charged with that are doing this is just like business malpractice. And I was like, that is bonkers. Some of like the real stories out there. And so I just kind of store that away, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this in a book one day. And so you end up with all this random knowledge that you kind of work in. A lot of the research to make things feel realistic is actually in the smaller things. And you kind of just buckle down and do it, I guess. Be careful what you Google.
Yeah, really. Clear your browsing
your
history.
Search history.
Yeah.
Right. And then like some things I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if it's perfect. How many people are going to like, I don't want to give spoilers away, but
yeah,
there are certain things at the end of the book. I'm like, nobody ever is going to find themselves in this position. And if they do, they have much bigger problems. So it's okay if we take a little bit of liberty. So as long as you're if you get like, I think like 85% of it spot on, you can play with the rest.
And it's fiction. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
like I'm also curious though, because it's not only the realisticness of it, but we know from just the synopsis alone before you even start reading that Cordelia is a serial killer. So you already kind of know part of the crime that's happening. How do you plan out the story like that? Because as a reader, I'm sitting here and all I can think is this woman going to get caught? Like, what is going to happen? And at the same time, it's not like a normal killer. Like, I don't want her caught. I don't want her to like fall from grace. I kind of mean, like, I don't condone bad behavior, but and so how do you write something, plan out the story without giving us, the
Well,
ending?
I wish plot came easier to me than characters. I'm very much a character first writer, as in I know who the people are before, and then I have to figure their story out, and I have to make it interesting enough to be a book.
Oh, interesting.
I feel like there are people that know like the twist first, and they write from there, and they're more
Yeah.
plot first characters, and they figure out the characters to plug into those situations. So like just different people think different ways. One's not necessarily better than the other. But I do kind of have to figure out the plot. I think of these interesting characters, and then I have to think of situations I can put them in. And for Cordelia, once I knew like who she was and I knew what she was doing, I was like, okay, she's not like an ex Navy SEAL. She's not like this super sniper. Like, she's a normal woman and she's doing this thing. So what would get in the way of like a normal woman trying to do these? Like, she has to do her normal things. And so I kind of tried to approach it from that angle. And I feel like that's what makes it so relatable, because I know for me, if I'm planning to do something big, if I was planning to do something big, it would be something dumb that would trip me up. Like, I would forget to search this one area for this little thing, or not have the one little thing I needed. I would have all the big things in place. And it would be some simple thing that would trip me up. Sorry, guys, I'm really trying to do it without spoilers.
I know, as we talk about it, I'm like, how do we?
I think the thing I found most interesting about the book, and what, like, among all the other reasons I kept reading, but the biggest one for me was watching Cordelia devolve and kind of unravel when things get in her way. So like you said, like forgetting to do a little thing or forgetting to check one thing, and then it like unravels, and seeing how she deals with all of that, which is very interesting to me. I don't know if you had any comments on how you were writing that.
Well, there's not I don't have a lot in common with Cordelia, but I can tell you that is one thing that is me. As someone who is both type A and has, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I feel like I have to keep everything, which Cordelia is not ADHD coded, but she has her own shit going on, to where you feel like you have to keep everything in such, like, in line. Down to the smallest detail. And then like when one thing goes wrong, you can roll with it. But then if two things go wrong, suddenly you're like, oh shit. And at any moment, things can really spiral out of control. And I feel like this is a pretty common feeling for people. Maybe not like every day, but I have a couple of friends who also are type A and have ADHD, and they were like, yeah, I get that. Like, there's kind of this misconception that you have, like, that we're a hot mess, and we are internally, but we keep such a tight control on everything that we're good until we're not good. So I try to like kind of tap into that for her. And I felt like for her, it's more of, she sees herself, like, she knows who she was and she knows where she come from, and she's so desperate to be perfect for all these different reasons, because she feels, like being perfect is part of her disguise. She can continue to hunt and kill, and if she's perfect, nobody will notice. But also just like she has something to prove to herself, and so she has a lot of shit she hasn't dealt with. And I think as things fall apart, she has to kind of deal with that, and just kind of has this reckoning with who she is and that maybe keeping everything in line all the time just isn't possible.
Well, thank you both for being here.